All right, so after we have just left the properties of water, we are going to get a brief intro to macromolecules, biological macromolecules today, and talk about the elements of life. So, a macromolecule is a big molecule. So that's what macro is, big. Macromolecules, or sometimes we might call them biologic macromolecules, because they're not just any type of big molecules, they're biologic ones, are the most important molecules or classes of molecules for living things. And biological macromolecules are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. And in the near future, we'll be doing short little videos on each of these four. But today we just want to get oriented with what are macromolecules, why are they important, and how do we form them. So let's just review that all of these macromolecules are made up of those same small handfuls of elements. In specific, all right, they are made up of that crucial four: carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, and hydrogen make up the vast majority of the macromolecules. There's also some sulfur and some phosphorus in them as well, but the core four, hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen, make up the bulk of macromolecules. And I included this slide again, just so you remember. We're talking about mostly these: carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, and then to a limited extent, phosphorus and sulfur make up all biological macromolecules. So when you'll see their structures next time, there's not a large diversity of elements that make them up. Biological macromolecules are called organic because they contain at least one carbon, right? Carbon. And carbon is important because it has four valence electrons, four electrons in its outside orbit, so it can bind to at most four other things. And carbon is extremely flexible. It can form millions of different compounds with other elements. And that's useful to use it as kind of the cornerstone of living things. There's also such thing as inorganic. So if there's organic molecules, there's inorganic molecules, which means that it doesn't contain carbon, or it's might contain carbon, but it's from a non-living. It's a non-living or non-essential to life source. Some important inorganic compounds that are necessary for life are like electrolytes, so large groups of inorganic compounds like salts and bases and acids that dissociate and dissolve into solutions to form ions. So, like potassium and sodium and chlorine that are dissolved as inorganic ions in your blood are important because they have important regulatory functions in living cells. Next, I just want to mention briefly about metabolism. So all of the chemical reactions that occur in your body, we kind of chuck under the name metabolism. There are kind of two types of those chemical reactions. There's catabolic or catabolism and anabolic or anabolism. Those are the two types of metabolism. In anabolism, these are the chemical reactions that join simple molecules together to form bigger, more complex molecules. And this requires energy. So it takes energy to build things, to put them together. In catabolic or catabolism are chemical reactions that break down complex compounds into simpler ones and release energy. So energy is released. We harvest energy from the catabolic reactions in your body, and we use those catabolic reactions, that energy, to power the anabolic, the energy requiring the building reactions. So that's going to bring me to the two most important catabolic and anabolic reactions in your body. So, all biological macromolecules are called polymers. And polymers are long molecules built up by linking repeating building blocks together into a chain. When we look at each of the macromolecules, I'll be more specific with this, but I just want to be kind of general so we get the idea today. So if this picture on the bottom is a good representation of a polymer. It's made up of repeating units, these small circles, all linked together. They're all the same, they're all linked together. Makes this a polymer. These individual parts that are linked together to make the longer polymer are called monomers. Mono meaning one. All right? So, to make polymers, we link together monomers via covalent bonds. That's what these lines are right here. And the process by which we form those covalent bonds, makes those linkages, is called dehydration synthesis. We remove water between the two monomers, and in doing so, we create a covalent bond. Dehydration synthesis might be the most important chemical reaction and is definitely the most important anabolic reaction that takes place in your body. All right. So here is another way of looking at dehydration synthesis. We join two monomers by taking water out. If we notice right here, one monomer donates a hydrogen, the other donates an OH. So these are groups that are attached to the structure of these monomers. And they come together, H and OH come together to form water, and they leave, and it's left with this covalent bond. That's what dehydration synthesis. It's also called a condensation reaction because it forms water. We get water out. This cloud here labeled enzyme, we'll talk about enzymes in the future, is there to remind me to tell you that because it requires energy, an enzyme will help this reaction happen. So if we have enough energy and we have an enzyme, specific enzyme to, to facilitate this, we can build big polymers out of monomers via dehydration synthesis. We can also do an opposite catabolic process. The reverse of dehydration synthesis is called hydrolysis. It's called hydrolysis because hydro, water, lysis, to break. We break a covalent bond using water. And it's just the opposite of dehydration synthesis. We, using an enzyme and water, we put the H and the OH back onto where they would be from this drawing, and in so doing, we break the covalent bond joining the monomers. So this is how we can break down polymers into smaller pieces, into monomers, via dehydration synthesis. So in today's module on Canvas, you actually see I have an animation where you're going to look at hydrolysis and dehydration synthesis more. In the next few videos that we do, we're going to look at how these look specifically in carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids, how dehydration synthesis and hydrolysis look in those specific structures. But the goal for today is just to get acquainted with the idea and understand how it works. So we'll talk more about this in the synchronous Zoom session, so please bring your questions. But otherwise, if you have something you need to ask more immediately, feel free to let me know.